So hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. This is the last of our 3 organizational capacity workshops. We have both lay leaders and professional staff in the room from organizations across the St. Louis Jewish community, and we're really, really glad you've joined us today. Federation's Millstone Institute and Community Impact Team are really excited to have partnered on this series, which has been offered in response to the findings of Federation's recent needs assessment of Jewish community-wide organizational capacity. And then that will make a couple references to a survey we did last year of community leadership during this presentation. So this series is really based on what we've heard from you. We are recording this session for those who wanted to be here but couldn't. I also want to invite you to rename yourself to include your organization name so we can all see who's in the room together. And you can do that by clicking the 3 dots at the top right corner of your name. We will be sharing a super short evaluation survey at the end of the workshop today. We'd really appreciate it if you take 2 minutes to fill it out, because that's how we know if the workshops we're providing are valuable to you. And I just want to take a quick minute to recognize the Federation lay leadership who have made this possible. Greg Yowitz, our board chair, Patty Krogan, chair of the Millstone Institute, and Craig Rosenthal, Community Impact Vice Chair. We could not do this work without their deep commitment to supporting organizations in our community, and I want to thank them for their work and leadership. And now I will introduce our facilitator, Nanette Friedman, who many of you know from past workshops with her. Nanette is a catalyst for values-driven organizations and leaders. She founded Friedman Strategies in 2006 to help leaders advance their missions and maximize their impact. She works with clients across North America, from small startup organizations to large international organizations, and focuses on strategic planning, governance and board development, financial resource development, and more. Before launching her consultancy, she worked as a corporate attorney and a national field director for an advocacy organization. She has a JD and master's in public policy from Georgetown University. Thank you so much for being here, Nanette. It's been great to have you with us for this series, and welcome once again.
Thank you, and thanks for all your help in setting everything up and background, and it's been great working together. I'm really delighted to be back today to talk about volunteer and professional relationships and communication. It is so core to everything else that we've talked about together and everything that we do. This is such an important topic, and I'm really glad that we have a dedicated slot to dive in together. So I am going to jump in a couple things. We're going to use the chat a lot today. So just FYI, and later on, I'm going to ask you to all change your name. So not yet, keep your name and your organization, but just so you know, but stay tuned on that. So right now I'm going to start with the chat, and I wonder if everyone could just tell us who's here, your organization and your role, and the best use for leftover matzah, because I really don't know what to do with it. I overbought, I'm going to be honest with you, and I need your help. So tell us in the chat your name, your organization, your role, and the best use for, if you have one, for leftover matzah. I think the pandemic had me happy shopping. So let me know what you're doing with yours in the chat. Landfill, Brian. All right. Feeding fish, birds, or turtles. All right, Sarah, I'm going to try matzah pizza, Ricky. We ate a lot of that. Just keep eating the matzah all year long. Randy, really? Okay. Hi, Betsy. Hi, Jen. Matzah brie. Peanut butter Joe. Matzah brie. Burn it. All right, David, I'm kind of with you. I'm done. Hi, Rosalie. Matzah pizza. Absolutely nothing, Karen. I'm kind of with you. Lots of matzah brie. Matzah brittle. Amanda, I don't think I know about that. Emily, matzah brie. Let your husband eat it, Ruth. Let me know your address. I can ship some. Duck food. Art projects. Oh, that's clever. Of course, Beth, camp director. You're resourceful. Matzah brie, Michelle. Apple streusel matzah kugel. Marion. Ooh, delish. Jelly, Gail says. Compost, Marla. Matzah brie, Mindy, for the rest of your family. Food pantry. Susan, I think that might be the winner if they want it. Nancy never has leftovers. Matzo farfel candy. Sylvia says not consistent with 12-year. That's so funny. This seems like someone, yep. Stacy says haven't brought bread yet. Whoa, wow. All right, you haven't done it yet. I ran right out. All right, well, thanks for all the good suggestions. I love it. And a good way to kind of acknowledge the moment that we are in post Passover here. You know, this is one of my favorite quotes, and I love a good quote. An African proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think it really captures the essence of the topic, is that a lot of times when we work with professionals and volunteers, there's a desire to kind of, oh, we could just get things done faster if we did it by ourselves. But that's really not the goal fast. The goal is to go far, to have deep impact. And that's why we do our work together. And so that's really the context for this conversation today. I have 4 goals. They are to discuss the key elements of successful volunteer and professional relationships, to talk about different relationship stages, to outline considerations for setting or resetting expectations, and together to identify challenges and potentially brainstorm some solutions. So I'm always ambitious, but I know we can do it. All right. So let's talk about successful relationships and what gets in the way. Okay. So here we're going to use our chat. Can you please tell me in the chat, what are key elements of successful volunteer and personal relationships and professional relationships? In your experience, what's the most important? So just list out, I want to know what are the secret ingredients here, or not so secret ingredients? What are the key elements in a successful relationship in your experience? Trust and candor, good stewardship and communication, absolutely. Mutual support and respect, sense of being seen and valued, being appreciative and thankful, listening, respect of one another, appreciation, trust, transparency, shared expectations, belief in the mission, building the relationship, setting expectations, trust, agreeing on mutual goals, clear understanding of each other's roles, shared mission and vision. Excellent. All there. Absolutely. The only ones I would add was something I like to call a culture of candor, right? I think that is a very important thing, and a culture of inquiry. Both asking questions, not making kind of assumptions, but having inquiry about the way we approach each other, and candor. I think those are both key elements in addition to everything that you added. And I would also add shared accountability and credit to that list. Anything else? Everyone around personal relationships? Yes, Susan, absolutely. Great. Well, this is a great list. Not surprising, what do you think are the challenges that come up most often now in volunteer and professional relationships? What are some challenges that you can list in the chat? What do you think are, and obviously some of them are just the opposite of what you wrote before, but let's see. Marion, you get what you pay for. Time. Having time for the task. Limit on time, keeping them engaged, training, lack of clarity on expectations, allowing volunteers in the building. Yep, right now that's a challenge for sure. And having them generally, maybe you mean. Burnout, absolutely. Professional growth. That's a challenge, Joe. Enough volunteers, enough people to do the work. Yeah, Stacy. Reliability. Yeah, Jennifer. Yep. Being able to rely on the people who are going to do what they say. Related to that is burnout and having enough people. 80-20 rule, right? That 20% of people do 80% of the work. Or 20% of the people give 80% of the money, sometimes on the other side. Absolutely. All of these. And the biggies that I hear are lack of trust, ineffective or unclear division of labor, poor communication, and different vision and goals, right? Or not explicit vision and goals. I think all of these things are true, and we can maintain them. So let's think a little bit about how we can strengthen, if we know this information that you were able to just so clearly articulate, how can we strengthen volunteer and staff partnerships? And this is really what we want to think about. How do we build trust and get to know each other? How do we make time for that and space for that? How do we ensure that we revisit roles and responsibilities annually? How do we adopt that culture of inquiry? How do we embrace and expect and respect and expect different opinions, right? We expect that we're not going to agree on everything. How do we have each other's backs? And how do we address challenges when they arise? To me, these are really the secret sauces, if you will, of operationalizing what we know is true about the strengths of good working partnerships and what we know is sometimes the challenges in working partnerships. These are how we can strengthen them by doing this kind of to-do list, if you will. But how do we do that? How do we make time and space, and how do we have presence of mind and intentionality around doing so when we have so many other things on our plate? And that leads me to wanting to talk about relationship stages, because this is another thing to manage, another thing to do for many people who are professionals and for volunteers who are doing this in addition to their lives, to their jobs, to their families. So how do we make some kind of shared expectations around what these relationships look like and how we create space and time for them so we can achieve the clarity that allows us to have strong relationships? I think this is about coming to agreement. And this isn't the former lawyer in me talking. This is the pragmatic person in me talking. I think we have to be really clear about what commitments we must make to each other and what understandings are required in order to have that productive relationship. And that they really fall often in the areas of communication and process, understanding each other's style and personal questions, talking about how the relationship will be managed, roles like many of you talked about, and leaving space for reflective questions that allow us to get at vision and other ways of what are priorities and things that matter. So to me, we really need to think about the relationship as an agreement. That's the place I start from. And when you have an agreement, we think about the beginning of the agreement when you are contracting. Again, I know I have lawyers on the call. I'm not talking about necessarily writing out a contract. I'm talking about approaching it when we start working with someone or we have an opportunity to restart working with someone, where we create an actual agreement and define the work to be done. We talk about our shared goals and the ways that we'll work together. And up front, we set up mechanism for dealing with differences and disputes, understanding that we will have along the road differences of opinions, and we might actually have real disagreements and things that we want to talk about. I always say praise publicly and quickly and share feedback privately and constructively. That's a golden rule. But we also want to put in there, how are we going to deal with, if you have a problem with me or you and I disagree about something, how are we going to talk it through and work it out? What does that look like? Some people say, don't email me, pick up the phone. Some people say, I want to meet in person if we can, pandemic. Other people say, I want to work it out before we get to the big meeting or the board meeting. Other people say, it's okay if we disagree as long as it's respectful. You need to know where each other stands and how you're going to approach it. So contracting, approaching the relationship as an agreement, thinking about the beginning of it at that contracting phase, really important. As with any contract though, we anticipate, at least I anticipate, that we write what we think or we guarantee or we talk about the things we know we should talk about at the beginning, but then we start doing the work and we may want to tweak, right? We may want to add things or we may want to course correct. So we want to make sure that we have a mid-year check-in. So when you start working with someone or start this process with someone, we're talking at the beginning, not diving into the work, but talking about how we're going to work together. And in that first setup, we want to build in a mid-year check-in. We want to assess what's been achieved, what success will look like moving forward, discuss how the relationship is or is not working. I love the exercise stop, start, and continue, where you ask, what should we stop doing? What do we need to start doing? And what's working so well that we should continue doing it? It's such a quick and easy exercise, but it's great for a mid-year check-in or a regular check-in. And by the way, I use it with my family. I use it all the time. It doesn't just have to be in professional volunteer relationships. But I would say to you that when you build the relationship with the expectation that we're going to grow together and learn together how we're working together, it takes away kind of, oh, I need to approach this subject, right? Or we need to tweak this in our relationship, because we're expecting that. We're expecting that working relationships are going to evolve over time, okay? So if you get off track, it kind of normalizes getting back on track. And if things are going great, you may be able to push ahead and achieve new goals or stretch goals together. But I think anticipating that we're going to create this time to check back in together is very helpful. Also, during this mid-year check-in, and some of this depends on your term for how long you'll be working together, but I think this is a great reminder to put succession planning on the agenda, because succession planning does not happen overnight. And if you have important, impactful work that you're doing, you want to start thinking intentionally early on about who will succeed the great volunteer you're working with. And you want to start working on that soon. Believe it or not, 6 months into the relationship isn't too soon. And again, it depends on the term. This did come out in the organizational capacity survey as an area that people believe could be strengthened, succession planning. So here's a place to put it in. When you're setting up your working relationships and you set a mid-year check-in, put succession planning on the agenda if it hasn't appeared somewhere else. It may have appeared somewhere else already, and that's fine. But if it hasn't, it's really important to put it on the agenda, and this is a good place. Now, when you get to the end of the year, or the end of the term, you want to have a closing. You want to evaluate what's been achieved and what remains to be done. You want to reflect on the learnings from the year or the term. You want to make an honest assessment of the contributions of each partner and appreciate each other's contributions. I want you to celebrate success, what you've done. And I want you to talk about bringing that successor along if you haven't already, or you need to continue to do so. And here's the really important thing. I work with so many organizations that spend lots of time getting people involved as volunteers and growing them as leaders. But we let them walk out the door when the term is done, and we don't adequately discuss how they want to stay engaged. That's a huge loss of opportunity. So here's a reminder. When you intentionalize and formalize this relationship with a beginning meeting to, kind of contract, a mid-year check-in, and now a closing, automatically on that kind of closing, we're going to ask the volunteer how they plan to stay engaged, how they want to continue to be involved. And that, to me, is a really important part of organizational sustainability. It is your shared history. It is also, for most organizations, if someone has been a great volunteer, we don't want to let them go. We want to keep them engaged. So it's a great place to do that. So these three kind of processes, if you will, of initial contracting, mid-year check-in, and closing, they sound like, okay, well, I get that. But believe it or not, if you think about your own relationships working with volunteers, if you are a professional, or with a professional if you're a volunteer, have you really had these formal conversations? How you're going to work together, how it's going, and how it went? Or do you just so anxious to jump into the work that you jump right into the work? Because we all love so much and feel so passionately about the work that's at hand. So I would just want to pause here for a second and hear from you in the chat. Does anyone do this? If they do, does it work? If you don't, is this something you might try? Just thoughts. If people want to put it in the chat or want to be called on or unmute, feel free to go ahead. Anyone doing this currently? Anyone doing parts of this? Anyone think about doing this or open to it? can't see everyone on the screen. So Nava or Marcy, if you see folks, feel free. Do people take the time to kind of anticipate and talk through with the others about the working relationship? Oh, okay. You're missing the piece of how to keep volunteers engaged. Ricky says we're doing parts of this with our fellows. We're trying to establish a method of doing this with our board members who are volunteers. Great. Excellent. So whatever pieces you aren't doing, we're constantly modifying and iterating and evolving. So wherever you're starting from, we have a range on the call here today. Whichever pieces you think you can add, play with them and introduce these back to your organization. I recognize we have agencies, day schools, synagogues, and synagogues have a unique situation, right? Because you have clergy and executives sometimes, and the board leadership. Day schools, of course, have head of schools. Some also have executives in addition, and agencies as well might have different people working with board members and committees. So this is something that whoever's on this call from your particular organization, it's an interesting conversation to have back home and think about what are you currently doing at what levels and what layers and what might you can think about adding. Great, thanks for sharing. Okay, so after we kind of set up this kind of formatting, we really dig into the meat of setting or resetting expectations. And these are the areas that I alluded to or said before about communication and process, style and personal questions, relationship management, roles, and an opportunity to reflect. Now, we are going to send this to you afterwards, so no need to take notes, but I think it's important to talk through what type of things do I think there should be expectations around? And I'd ask you each to consider wherever you are sitting in your organization, figuratively and literally maybe, which one of these, which of these feel most applicable, which you're already doing, and which you might want to play with. So for communication, really simply, how often will you meet? Where and how will you meet? Who makes the agenda for those one-on-one meetings? Remember my rule, no agenda, no meeting. How often will you communicate in between meetings? What's the preferred method of communication? What's the preferred schedule? Are there blackout days or times? I hear from people all the time that say, I can't have my volunteers during the day. They're working, they don't reply to 8 o'clock at night. It's either 6 a.m. or 8 o'clock at night. Okay, well, if you know that up front, that's important information. Also, I have people who don't like email. They prefer text. I have people who don't like text at all. They feel like they lose the thread and they don't want to be contacted on their work email. So how and where, the method and the schedule for communication is really important to have clear. Also, what level of detail are you each looking for, right? Is it really detailed? I had a volunteer that told a professional, I like bullets. Don't give me a lot of detail. Just keep it at the bullet level. And others will say, no, I want to know as much detail as you have. Well, that's really important to know. How will you share and edit documents? Do you mind if we send them as attachments and we edit back and forth? Do you want them up on a shared drive? Do you only do it with a paper and fax it back? I still have people that are faxing me comments that they write with a red pen, right? Or what does that look like for your organization? And what are you committing to? Are you committing to sending to each other any letters that will have the volunteer's name on it before they go out? Are you committing to timing on meeting notes? When you'll see them, how soon after a meeting, or on an agenda, how far in advance before a meeting? What are you committing to? So I think all of these things fall under the communication bucket and probably things I haven't included. And what I would encourage you to take the time to do is when you're doing that first contracting phase, the more of this you can have clarity and agreement and shared expectation on, it just makes the working relationship that much easier. And some of these things you may know because you may have already worked with this person in another capacity, but it doesn't hurt to check in. It doesn't take long to run through these type of communication expectations. Next, we talk about style and personal questions. And this requires a little bit more of a conversation about each person's leadership style and philosophy. What are people's clear boundaries? I always ask people when I start working with them, what are your pet peeves? I want to make sure I don't do those things, right? What are your hot button issues organizationally or, with our mission? Do you like to know about issues as soon as they exist or once there's more clarity and information? Some people say, depending on their position, I want to know right away. Other people say, let me know as it sorts itself out if I need to know. Well, that's a big difference. That's a big difference. So these type of style and personal questions can really help uncover and can help avoid and prevent situations down the road. Some of you are nodding, which makes me feel like maybe you've gotten into a situation down the road that if you had asked these questions up front, you might have avoided. But these are important for you to consider. And again, you're not going to sit with someone and contract and say, okay, let me take out my pen. We're writing or typing a contract here. But these are more conversation starters to have so you both have a shared understanding. Even more important if there are co-chairs or co-leaders involved or co-professionals managing and working with the same volunteer. Oh, sorry. In terms of relationship management, I talked about some of this before, but I think it's really important upfront to talk about how you will offer differing opinions and disagree as part of quality decision making. I expect that people will have differing opinions. How do you allow for that? What do you do with that? How do you integrate that into part of quality decision making? Okay. How will you assess the level of disagreement? Right? And how can you keep the lens on how important is this to the organization? You may disagree about something that's really not that material or doesn't really matter one way or the other, or there may be something that really matters to the organization. So then how does that change how you approach it? How can you agree to let go on things that don't matter so much or you don't care that much about and put the relationship first? Right? The relationship first is really important. We want that relationship above anything. We want to be, when I got married, the rabbi said, you can be happy or right. Pick which one you like, right? And, I think here, I appreciate the last, thank you. What I would say is, some things, if they're really core and really important, great, but we always want to put the relationship first. How and when will you give each other performance feedback? And some people are saying, I'm a volunteer, I'm going to get performance feedback. Well, it's not exactly the same thing, but what I'm thinking here is more about how is the role going? Is it too big? Is it too much? Is it something that you feel needs to be re-looked at in terms of the expectations or the size? Is it something that you might want someone with different skill set to help out with pieces of? That's the type of conversation I want to see happening. And I think we both, on both sides of the professionals and the lay leaders, we want to see feedback as a gift. How can we agree to that? And not see feedback as being critical or judgmental, but seeing it as a way that we love the organization and we love the mission and we want to work well together. And the feedback is given with the best intentions to help the working relationship, to allow us to work more smoothly, to do better in serving the mission. So I think calling that out at the get-go. I want to be able to give you feedback. Is that okay? But I wanted you to know that it's always going to come from a good place and will be done respectfully. And I hope we can both see feedback as a gift. How and when will you check in on the goals in addition to the mid-year check-in? And what mechanism can you establish for navigating challenges? I have a rule that if you're upset with me, I don't want to learn about it in an email. I think email is the absolute worst thing. You cannot judge tone, intonation. Like, email is a terrible, terrible way to indicate that you have a problem with something. Don't do it. I just want to tell people, don't do it. So for me, one of the mechanisms for establishing and navigating when there are challenges is make a time to talk. Please don't email me about it. I don't want to get into a dialogue back and forth, and feel free to be forthcoming with it. There's something that's on my mind that I want to address because I value the relationship so much and I want to share it with you. Okay. That's really courageous. And we need brave leadership on both sides. And I want to permission you to be brave in that way. I hope I don't get a lot of phone calls later in a couple of weeks being like, you told us. But I do think that it's in the best interest of the working relationship and in the best interest of the organization to not let things fester. Nothing good comes when we sweep it under the rug. As my mother would say, you just get bugs. When you sweep it under the rug, you get bugs, okay? You know, someone's gonna, I want one of those Ramba things, Roomba, whatever. Anyway, the point is, don't sweep things under the rug if they're important. If they're not important, let them go. But if they are important, don't sweep them under the rug. And the more we talk about this, like in any relationship, someone wrote me, I was in another city doing a similar thing, and someone said, my wife and I would like to be part of this training next time. Could you do this for couples? A lot of this applies. This is about relationships, right? I mean, we're in relationship with each other. And so you might be saying a lot of these things do apply in other settings, and they do. What is unique here is roles, right? Well, not so unique, I guess, in every relationship there are roles divisions, but what is the process specifically in these roles for preparing for meetings? How do you balance getting the work done and also allowing people to feel engaged over Zoom, the land we're living in now, or even in person when we get back to that land? What roles do each of you play at the meeting? Who presents? Which parts? Who facilitates? What's the process of debriefing? How are shared external relationships for development and community building identified, managed, and tracked? How are goals set? So that's not just about development, by the way. That's about anyone that works in an organization that's trying to raise friends, get new members, or raise dollars. It's all the same. Whether you have when you need external people, how are you identifying who is the relationship manager with whom? My English teacher would be so proud of that. And how you're managing and tracking it and how each other knows about it. Okay, that's the conundrum for most organizations. I say I'm going to take these 3 people, or I go have these great conversations. How's that information fuel back? How's that information come back in? And how do we get a chance to talk about it? Is that something that's on our weekly meeting or monthly meeting? Is there a shared database? Do I send the information to the database keeper? What do you want me to do with it? Okay. And really important, as Marcy and Nava and I talked about, be prepared for gray areas between who has the authority and who has the expertise. It's not always going to be as clear as, well, I'm the chair and you're the executive director, or I'm the committee chair and you're the staff person. There's a lot of gray between authority and expertise of where decisions live and where good decision making lives. And it requires dialogue. And the problem in the time that we live in is dialogue takes time. You cannot shortcut it. And I think a lot of the issues that come out, if we put some of these processes in place where we create the time and the space, can be avoided. But it's not canceling those standing meetings. It's not canceling those check-ins. It's keeping them and keeping the dialogue going. Really, really crucial to keep it going. I think that it is important for us to think about the relationship and the strength of the relationship as a goal. It is not, to me, just a goal to raise more money, to have more members, to do whatever your mission is. A goal is the quality of the relationships that we have. And that, to me, changes everything about taking the time to do this as I'm laying it out. If a goal that we're going to measure our success is the quality of the working relationship, then how would that be different in your organization for how these relationships are resourced with time, energy, and space? So something for you to consider. And finally, on this topic of, what are the expectations and what are the things we talk about, reflective questions. What are the important issues you anticipate this year, over this term, if you have a 2-year term or a 3-year term? What are your priorities, right? What are your shared priorities? And by the way, the organization The organization has priorities. The organization had pre-COVID priorities. It has during COVID priorities. It's going to have post-COVID, well, kind of post-ish COVID priorities. And individuals took a job sometimes not realizing where the organization was going to be at. So how does that all get sorted out? If I've been in line to be board chair pre-COVID, I even knew the word COVID, and now I'm board chair and I thought we were going to be doing X, but now we're doing Y. How do we talk about that? How do we talk about that so you understand where I'm at, where my priorities are given the new realities, what our shared priorities are, which piece of work do I not want to do? Just had a conversation in St. Louis, you're going to appreciate this. Had a conversation with a client in a different city that said, I know this board needs to relook at its bylaws. I'm not the president to do that. I do not want to do that. I am not going to do it. I don't want to do it. And you're going to have to wait for the next person. Okay. But thank God they spoke up, because can you imagine if they suffered through 2 years of doing it and resented it every day? And it can wait in this case. So I think it's an interesting, and it's important conversation about priorities and knowing where each other stands. So I want to kind of pause there before we talk about challenges. Is there something on expectations? I want to just take down this for a second. That resonates with you, about that you are already doing, that you're not doing, that you would add? I mean, are these the right questions to be calling when we think about our relationships? And what's new to you, or what can you add? I'd love just to hear you. Or feel free to type. And thank you, Penny, for your note.
I see Marianne raising her hand.
Oh, please, Marianne.
So, you know, I love these workshops, and I thank Nanette and Federation for providing them, because I always learn something new and look at things with a totally different set of eyes. So I really appreciate that. Having said that, this feels very formal to me, you know, and particularly because we're a small organization with a very small staff of 1 1/4. So, you know, and the conundrum is that means more volunteers, but I don't have the time to manage them this way. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I will definitely take some of what you are teaching us into account, but I don't know that I could do it justice, given, you know, the other things that I have to do.
I so appreciate you saying that. And yes. This is like a menu that you choose from based on the size of your organization and the realities that you're from, right? So I don't expect that anyone is going to do this exactly as it's laid out. What I do expect and hope that you take a few things that inform the conversation to make the relationship stronger based on what you're able to do, given your size and the number of people you manage, and you know that we're human. So I totally appreciate that comment. And I think that it's very important that this conversation of these relationships, you know, even just kind of having a first meeting to talk about expectations broadly without all these questions. Let's talk about expectations. Let's talk about anything you want to. What should I know about you? What should you know about me? What should we know about working together? I would take that as opposed to jumping straight into the meeting, right? My big overall message, whether you follow this to the letter or not, is have a moment in time where you're just focused on the relationship before you jump into the work, and permission there to be opportunities to tweak that relationship as you go along. That would be my biggest takeaway. If you don't do anything else, do that. And if you can add in more, and you can take some of these things about, you know, succession planning, or some of the things about, we're going to talk about in a minute about, you know, celebrating, great. But 100%, thank you. Agree. Jennifer says, I think COVID is adding complexity to the volunteer engagement model. Yes, it certainly is. And in some ways, when we look at our volunteers that we have in many organizations have really stepped up, you know, in many ways, that we see that relationship, making the quality of the relationship a goal in of itself, and we'll talk a little bit later, celebrating the relationship and what's been accomplished and the goals and the success together is really important. It has certainly added to the complexity of managing volunteers. We're managing, for disinfectant and mask and temperature checks and all these other things, and managing state rules and compliance and federal and, all these things, CDC. So managing one more thing to this level is certainly a lot. I think we have to pick and choose. And I think, as much as I would like to say that all volunteer relationships should have this level of attention to them, that's simply not going to be doable for everybody. But what if your chair and your lead executive, or what if your development chair and your development director, if you have one, or what if one or two of these start to model some of this behavior? What would that look like? But I agree that expecting this all the way throughout and with the complexities will be a challenge. Michelle, also looking at how we have adjusted and pivoted, do we know how each of us is feeling about the changes that have taken place? How much do we share personally with each other? It's so important. Thank you, Michelle, for bringing that up. Absolutely on the conversation is, wait, how are you? First and foremost, how are you? And how do you feel starting to come out of this? How do you feel about the changes that have taken place? And how do you share personally? How much you share? I think everyone has to make their own judgment about what they feel comfortable sharing, and people should respect the boundaries that other people establish on that. But I do think it's important, as it relates to the work that you're committing to do together, that you have certainly that conversation about the professional piece of it, for sure. Thank you, Michelle. Great, these are super and spot on. I mean, really spot on. Anyone have anything else before I talk about some challenges, or let you talk about some challenges or celebrations? Okay, so here's what I'd love you to do. If everyone could change their name to people. People who need people are the luckiest people in the world. I'm not going to sing for you because I was not blessed with a good voice, but I want your name to be people. I want everyone's name to be people, because I'm going to ask you to dish, and I want you to dish with confidence and confidentiality. And I don't want you to feel like, oh, I'm not going to say anything. So change your name to people. If you want to know how to change your name, go to the top right of your square, click on the rename button, and you can change your name to people. I want to see everyone's name be people. People, people, people. Okay. We are going to talk about challenges. And by the way, if you want to leave your name and you don't care about sharing with your name, feel free, or putting your name, but I just like it this way. Okay. Challenges. So all of this, what I just laid out, is my best hope for how we can set up relationships. But even if we do all this, I'm sorry to tell you, we're still going to have challenges in managing the professional and volunteer relationships, because they're between people. And it turns out people are pretty complicated and complex. So I would love to hear from you. What are some current, past, or anticipated challenges that you've either experienced, heard about, or want to get out? And let's put them in the chat, and then let's talk about them. So what are some challenges that you've encountered, either with professionals or volunteers or both, in this relationship? But be specific. So for example, a specific example might be a volunteer is close friends with another staff member. I'm not suggesting, I'm just saying an example I got in another city. Another example, a staff member emails a volunteer multiple times a day. And again, like, these are just things that have come up in other cities. So what are challenges in professional volunteer working relationships? All right. People have said, when the lay leader has a stronger relationship with someone else in the organization and keeps going to them instead of me. Yes, classic. Very important to know not only the roles, but the org chart. The org chart If everyone is not familiar, if you have a large enough organization that you have an org chart, my friend who just talked about having one employee, maybe not so much, but if you have an org chart, you want to make sure that it's clear why you two are in relationship, the two people, and how information and decision-making flows and should flow. And if there is a concern, that should run through the professional who's working with the volunteer, and also making sure that people understand that information that is shared, what's private, what's confidential, what is still being worked out, what's not final yet, and how does that play into respecting kind of the flow of information. But that is really key. And if that continues, where a volunteer has a strong relationship with someone else and keeps going to them, it's also the role where the other person that they're going to can say, you really need to go with the person who's your point person first, or really need to go to them, period, not even first, but you need to go to them. This isn't my role. And I think that's really important, that everyone speaks with the same voice on that. Working around the pandemic and not being able to go into the office, yes, so very challenging. 3 ideas. If you want to meet together with if your organization allows it, some organizations are not, but if your organization does allow outside meetings now that the weather is nicer, I think it is nice to do some social working outside, distanced with masks, even if need be, or to even, have a dedicated Zoom with a coffee and not even work, but just a social Zoom. But it is a challenge with the pandemic and not going into the office, and also a challenge for the relationships. Volunteers who agree to take on a role but don't put any effort. Okay, here's the thing. We have to manage this. Everyone has to get a little bit of a test case first. So when we start working with someone, and our hope is they're going to take 20 people to reach out to, we don't want to give them 20 people at once. We want to give them 5 people at once and want to see how we do. And then we want to talk about it. And I also think it's like a realistic assessment that we want to ask people about, what do you have time to do? And can we agree on a deadline? Because if someone takes, let's say, 5 names or 20 names, but they don't do it, they don't put in the effort, that has to come back and someone else has to do it. So we need a deadline, right? So it's important to have those deadlines in addition, and also to feel free to check in with people and say, listen, I know you took this role, maybe you don't have as much time. Give people an out sometimes to say, I want to do this, but it's just a terrible time for me. Or I want to do this, but it's much more work than I thought. Make that okay. Dedicated and passionate volunteers who have different timelines. Yes. Again, what is the realistic timeline is a 2-way conversation, because you as the professional have different things that you're balancing, and they need to know, the lay leader, the volunteer needs to understand where it fits organizationally on the organizational timeline. Maybe the marketing department has a backlog. Maybe there's a process to the way things get done. Maybe you have other things that are priority. And the volunteer needs a chance to explain why they think something needs to be expedited. Maybe there's a piece of information they have that's not clear. But that's a clear conversation about timing, where you need to dialogue and really talk that out and come to an agreement on the timeline. And if the timeline is going to vary from what you agreed upon, inform each other. Professional staff member refuses to report according to the org chart. That is a challenge, and that is something that can come back in feedback that person gets as part of their review if people are not reporting according to the org chart. I think, let's see. Hold on. Committee chairs unwilling to take initiative. Do you have job descriptions? Did they have a written job description before they took the committee chair? Did they know what the time commitment was? Did we offer them a mentor? If we did all those things and they still can't take initiative, it's a conversation about what are they willing to do? What are they interested in doing? And what are they not? And I think that's fair. Defining volunteers and lay leaders' roles vis-a-vis advisory versus action. Everyone has ideas, but implementing is a different matter. Yes. So input versus decision-making. We want input, and then we have to take it back. There are lots of factors. Sometimes budget, prioritization, who else is available to work on it, what, other kind of things that are available. And then how will the ultimate decision get made? We're taking all the input, and the ultimate decision maker is going to be made by, who is it? Be clear on that. Who has the authority to make a decision? Who's giving input to the decision? Those are two very different things. And I think that is important to clarify. Let's see. A few volunteers that take on big roles and do the work, but purposely keep staff out of the loop, finish their volunteer role feeling negatively about the experience. The conflict isn't addressed by leadership because there are some who fear if they do address it, they'll stop taking on these big projects. Yeah, it's tough. So one thing I'll say, I feel sweeping things under the rug, you pay for it one way or the other, the bugs are going to crawl. But the question is, how can you address it? It's not if, but it's how it gets addressed. So I think the question is it addressed during? Is it addressed? So it's like we learn from it and then we go forward. Is it addressed at the volunteer level? Is it addressed at the professional level? I think the idea that there is conflict and negative feelings, I think that the lack of addressing it doesn't make those things go away. I think that negative feelings don't go away when we don't address things. I think we don't have to give everything equal weight and equal time, but I do think that coming up with an appropriate level is important. Wait, Marcy typed in her chat. Oh, that staff annoyed at the volunteer for, this is not Marcy. Staff annoyed at the volunteer for wanting to be involved in every little decision, and volunteer annoyed at the staff for not using their expertise. Okay, so this is really important. This goes along the line about input versus decision making. I think that using people's expertise is so key to making that a meaningful engagement. I also think that people need to understand the scope of the leeway that we have in decision making and the amount of time and budget and resources for decisions. And so sometimes people have deep expertise that we can't actualize all of it because the project just doesn't allow for it. And that can be frustrating. Sometimes we have deep expertise that we don't access adequately at all. And that's a wasted opportunity. And if we don't need it in one scenario, maybe we can say, it's really clear that you're a marketing genius. This really isn't a marketing issue right now, but can I pass your name along? Because there are other people that would really benefit from this. If it is a marketing scenario where marketing expertise could be helpful, it's giving the space for that and the time for that expertise to be heard. I think that's really important. And then taking from it what's appropriate. All right, these are really great. Hold on, I just want to make sure. Okay, having volunteered at various nonprofits, the staff makes a tremendous impact on my desire to dedicate myself to a cause or mission. Challenge, what makes me want to distance myself from an organization when the lay leader undercuts, challenges your contributions. Got it. So I think that this really speaks to sharing credit, celebrating success together, both the professionals and the volunteers. And this relationship is a driver for many people in deciding to donate their time. Who you're going to work with is often as important as the work that you're going to do. And I think we need to acknowledge that, which is even more reason that investing in the relationship development and formation is that much more important, and making a strong relationship something that is visible. So the next board chair, the next development chair, the next program chair sees this is a positive working relationship, and this is a positive experience if I step into leadership. And I think that is something that helps the organization overall. But sharing, very important to never undercut or challenge or not give spotlight to equal or unequal, if they are, contributions. We want everyone to shine. We want the professional and the volunteers to have credit. We want everyone to shine. This is, you know, really a situation where we want to celebrate everything and everyone. You know, as I've told you before, I'm excited by the air. I want to celebrate everything, little and small. And the research tells us actually that when we do work that we are intrinsically motivated to do, that the progress principle, professor at Harvard wrote a book about this, there's a TED talk about it, that the progress principle means that when you celebrate the small progress that you make, you're more motivated to keep going towards the big goals. And that is fundamental in these relationships. We celebrate, we got the meeting, yay, good, go team. Or we got through a really difficult conversation, yay, team. Or we made a big decision with a third-party contractor, yay, team. Or we reached a goal. Really celebrate everything you can. Right now, I know it's hard because we can't be together to celebrate maybe with food and beverage as we might have in the past, but we can still celebrate nonetheless. A nice email, a shout out, a little token goes a long, long way. I want to talk about one subject that someone messaged me about privately, which is the challenge of people sharing information. And I do want to address that because I think it comes up often. I do want to talk specifically about it. I think that information is a currency in many ways, and information can be dangerous. You know, I think that one of the questions I had here, and I want to remind myself of it, was, you know, we really do need to adopt policies around Lashon Hara, or the evil tongue, or speaking ill. It really does poison, you know, the organization and the working relationship. And we want to remind people to think about information that they hear and to ask themselves, is this information yours to share? And when you share it, if it is yours to share, are you sharing it in the appropriate space? Marcy shared those two questions with me, and I think they're right. But I also think in general, we have to remind ourselves what's confidential, what's sensitive. Might not be confidential, but it's sensitive. And what's just not really for public consumption because it's not necessary, right? Or it's not yours to share, or the timing's off. And certainly commit to no Lashon Hara or no evil tongue. I'm reminded of the story of the feathers, where the kids always hear this story, and I always say this at board meetings if this is an issue, where there's a problem and the rabbi says, go bring me a pillow, and they bring back the pillow, and the rabbi says, cut the pillow open and let all the feathers go around. And the person cuts the pillow and lets all the feathers go around. So the rabbi says, go collect all the feathers. Says, I can't collect all the feathers. They blew all over the place. And the rabbi says, right. And that's what happens when you spread gossip or you do Lashon Hara, right? You can't collect it back up. Even more true in the information age we live in, right? Even more true now. So this is a really important part. It can be corrosive to an organization, a relationship, if we do have this. And I always address this. I like to address this, you know, up front. And I think if your organization does have people sign confidentiality agreements, good for you. That's important. Sometimes only board members sign those and not committee members. I will say if committee members are dealing with sensitive information, it isn't a bad idea to have people sign confidentiality agreements, especially around financial information or donor information. So I do want to just put that out there, but this is a big topic. And I do want you to take this home. If you take nothing else home, share the feathers. Okay, I want to remind myself about that. I want to also just throw out about celebrating for a second. I didn't say this before, but in that organizational capacity survey that was referenced earlier, that was taken by agency and organizational professional leaders and board leaders, you do have in St. Louis that organizations feel successful in celebrating and appreciating volunteers. So yay. And people do feel that recognizing frontline volunteers and board level is a strength. So great, that's amazing, keep that going. I love that the survey already said that. And you know, keep on celebrating. I didn't want to I didn't want to lose that thread. Okay, so now is the time that many of you might be thinking, is this ever going to come? I'm going to be quiet and we're going to have Q&A. So I have shared with you kind of what I think is the greatest hits on the relationships in terms of, you know, time and space, stages, expectations, and challenges and celebrations. Yay. But now, you know, I invite you to either stay people or to go back to your name, but I just want to open it up for our remaining time together to any questions. So feel free to either use the chat or feel free to unmute, but we really just want to make sure we can answer anything that you have that we didn't discuss. Pitch perfect. We covered it all. What resonates? What are you going to take back? What's a nugget? Is anyone taking back a particular nugget that you can unmute and tell me? Something that's sticky for you. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I'll just say I'm meeting with someone Monday who's taken on the role to chair an ad hoc committee. And so this is going to be really helpful in when we get together in setting up what you just said, our roles, the expectations, how we're going to do this. So yeah, this is great and really good timing for me.
Perfect. Excellent. Thank you. Someone just wrote build-in check-ins from the beginning, culture of respectful candor. Communication, communication, communication. That's right. That's exactly right. Other thoughts? Oh, assurance that we're moving in the right direction. We've been talking through setting up a volunteer program with these aspects for some time. Amazing. That's great. Keep going. You got it.
I'm wondering if you would address, I know at least for our organization, one of the big issues is you had discussed like the transition when volunteers leave, especially like they've been on the board. Often they were really involved before that. And sometimes they just sort of like drop away. And I love the idea of keeping them engaged. Do you have some like examples of things, ways to approach that, especially because sometimes people are a little burned out. So like being able to give them space, but not let them get like totally away from the organization.
Totally. It's funny you ask. I happen to have a couple of ideas. So I believe that people who have served in leadership should be mentors, board buddies, committee buddies, you know, resources, not just because they have institutional knowledge, but they've done the actual role. So I, you know, almost without fail will say, unless the person was terrible, please ask them if they would be willing to be a mentor or a buddy to someone that takes a similar position. That to me, yes. The other thing is, was there something that they were particularly energized by that isn't done yet? So sometimes sometimes our work doesn't line up with our terms, so to speak. So if there's a piece of work that's really meaningful to them that they either want to stay involved with to see through, or they want to just stay involved with. So you might have started something, now it's going to continue. So you're not going to be the chair or the leader of it anymore, but you may be on the committee, the subcommittee, or you may be on the advisory committee, or you may, play a role. So I think finding out what they like the most that they worked on, and like keeping that piece going in addition to being a mentor or buddy. And the third, I think is really about where do they go from wherever they were with their leadership, right? And obviously if you were treasurer or vice chair, maybe you go to being chair. And if you're chair, maybe you serve as being immediate past chair. But then if your organization doesn't call for it, where do they go? Is there a place structurally for them? Is that a meaningful place? If there's not a place for them, what do you need them to do next? And I'll give you all the answer. Write this down. The answer is legacy giving. The answer is no one's doing enough legacy giving. Everyone needs people who have been in leadership to be on their legacy committees. And I really urge my organizations that I work closely with to almost make that automatic, that if you've been board chair, you've been development committee chair, that we ask you, you don't always say yes, but we ask you if you'll take on legacy giving afterwards, because you know the people and It is so crucial to every single organization. And we don't ever seem to have enough people. So three ideas. Someone wrote, you can't know if something was successful unless you set expectations from the beginning that you can refer to. Right on. Other thoughts, comments, concerns, ideas, stickies? All right. Well, I think that you're great. And I think this is such a special community. Thank you for having me and inviting me in to learn together. I was telling Marcy and Nava that I consider learning with organizations that we're creating open source materials. So I'm going to be sending you this deck. I hope you'll use it. I hope you bring it with you to your board, to your volunteers, to your staff meetings, to your committee meetings. And I hope that you'll add to it, and then you'll tell me what you added so I can pass it on to the next person and the next community, because we are all learning together. And above everything, we're in learning organizations. If we're not, I'm in the wrong spot. But so thank you. Whoever said Nanette's amazing, thank you. I like you, you're my people. Get what I see what I did there. Otherwise, feel free to change your name back. Thanks for spending the time together, and I'll turn it back over to you. Marcy.
Yeah, so it's been wonderful being with everyone this afternoon, and on behalf of Federation formally.
Marcy, you got muted.
Okay, what did I say? On behalf of Federation formally and behalf on each of us individually, I just want to express my appreciation to the one and only Nanette, who is so generous with her knowledge and the way she formats and the way she engages. And I think each of us learns from her every single time. So thank you, Nanette. And I hope there's a way that we can continue some type of relationship. I know many of us have been on all your calls, and if this is the first time you're seeing Nanette, you're like, oh, now I get what they were talking about. I also want to share that for those of you who know me, this is my favorite subject at all. Please use me, whether it's technical related to boards and committees, and I'm also a certified leadership coach, and this is the area I'd like to coach on more than any other area. So if I can be helpful, I'd love to be helpful. And if I don't think I can be helpful, I'm happy to find you the person that can help support you, support your board, support your organization. So on behalf of Community Impact, the Millstone Institute, and Federation, thank you for who you are and what you do.
Thanks, everyone. And please take a minute to fill out our survey that I just put in the chat to let us know what you thought of the program. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you, Nanette and Marcy.